Hello, welcome back to the Trans Connections. My name's Allison. I'm your host. I want to talk a little bit today about my experience with hormones and how they literally changed my life, but also with everything that's going on in our country regarding trans youth and hormones and trans healthcare for youth. I kind of want to talk a little bit about uh, some of that and what it means for the youth of America and in each one of these states that is wanting to block puberty blockers and ban trans health care for youth or anyone under the age of 18. So, starting with myself, when I first came out and started understanding what it meant to be trans and learning more about myself and what I wanted for myself and how I wanted to move forward with my transition, both medically and socially. Um, in conjunction with my therapist that I had been seeing, I started talking about hormones and what her experience was with patients who were on hormones and maybe patients that weren't on hormones yet or decided not to go on hormones. And the more that I talked with her, the more I decided that that was the direction I wanted to go. So, one of the things that I needed to do was, after talking to her for several months about it, start the idea of socially transitioning. And what that meant was coming out to friends and family and start the process of sharing with people who matter to me what it might look like for me moving forward. Um, if you've listened to any of the previous podcast episodes that are available here on the YouTube channel or on wherever you get your podcast, I say this frequently, and I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. A really good friend of mine, when I first came out to him, shared this with me as I was talking about some of my fears of coming out to different friends and family. And he said, look, the people that matter don't care, and the people that care don't matter. And while I certainly understand that that doesn't apply to every person that you may interact with, for me, it struck a chord and it really made me feel more comfortable coming out to everyone that I came out to and have come out to. Because really, the people that matter honestly haven't cared. I'm very fortunate in that respect. When I came out to my parents, my mom, my family, sisters, brothers, they were very supportive, very friendly, very excited for me. Um, there certainly was some um, not not hesitation, but just fear for me and what that would mean, and so coming out to them was definitely a nerve-wracking and anxiety-ridden experience, but that was the first step to being able to start medically transitioning. My therapist felt like that was a great way for me to, one, be very comfortable with the thought of medically transitioning, but also kind of preparing me for the next steps and building that social and circle of people that I would be able to lean on outside of therapy. So I came out to all my friends and family. That went much smoother than I anticipated. I was prepared for the absolute worst and was pleasantly surprised. About 3 months after I started talking to my therapist about getting on hormones and those next steps and coming out to friends and family, my therapist wrote me a letter for an endocrinologist to prescribe hormones. So when I had my first consultation with the endocrinologist, literally the first thing we did was go get blood work done. We needed to measure um, everything to make sure that I wasn't at any exceptional risks, but also to try to figure out where to start for um, hormones. So after the blood work was done, we immediately got started on testosterone blockers. I was on two to start. Those two testosterone blockers that I started with, first one was just a basic testosterone blocker. Second one was for uh, specifically for receding hairlines in men, and so we started on those two just to get them going, and then I started taking estrogen. I first started taking the pills, which was fine at first, but very quickly started getting to be way too many pills that I was taking. And the reason for that is I was on two separate testosterone blockers. One of them was twice a day, the other one was once a day. And then the estrogen pills were twice a day, and they were, because of how small those dosages are, my endocrinologist was prescribing me to be taking 3 to 4 twice a day. So I was taking 8 of those pills a day, 6 to 8 a day, which is a significant number of pills that I was taking and having to remember to take. And if I was out late or spent the night at a friend's house because we were out hanging out and I didn't want to drive home, whatever the reason was, it meant that I had to carry that many pills with me all the time. And so I talked to my endocrinologist about changing up to injections. I'll get into that a little bit later. The Before I got to injections, though, about 6 months after starting on hormones, I talked to my endocrinologist about progesterone. Progesterone is one of those unique and, I guess, interesting medications in the trans world in that there isn't really any evidence that it works. There also is no evidence that it doesn't work. And when I say work, I mean the reason to take it is 100% for breast growth. For me, breast growth was something that was really important to me, and I didn't want to have to necessarily just plan for breast augmentation. It's something that I'm open to in the future, but it's not something that I wanted to have to plan for. And I felt like breasts that was a big part of my medical transition, and I wanted to feel more confident in my body, and that was something that was really important to me. Having small breasts was not something that I wasn't necessarily concerned with, but just having them there. And progesterone supposedly helps with that growth. I don't know if it's helped or not since I started so early on, but I do feel much more comfortable and confident in my breast development 3 or 4 years in. Now, from a changes standpoint, the general thought process is you'll start noticing changes within 2 to 3 months after starting hormones. And they can last all the way up until about 5 years. New changes or changes continuing about 5 years after you start hormones. So I am definitely still in the middle of that. We like to call that second puberty. And honestly, going through a second puberty has been a lot over the last 4 years, trying to figure things out about myself, learning new things about myself, learning what I like, learning what I don't like, from a clothing standpoint, just from a daily standpoint, walking around, living life standpoint. I'm definitely 4 years in, starting to feel like things are slowing down and no more big changes. the big changes all started right around the 1 year mark, from a physical standpoint. And physical changes are the things that people tend to be most interested in. From a, I guess, mental standpoint, and from a psychological standpoint, the hormones affected me pretty quickly. I think it was only 3 to 4 weeks after starting hormones that I immediately started seeing those changes, and they were big right away for me. I like to, I can't take credit for this. I don't remember where I saw it, but I like to equate it to the difference between a 50s TV, black and white TV, and TVs that you're going to buy today that are 8K, super high definition, lots of colors, from an emotion standpoint and a psychological standpoint. So pre-hormones, my emotional range was black and white. I had basically 3 emotions that I could convey at any given time: anger, sadness, and every once in a while, like, joy, but it wasn't like genuine joy and happiness. It was just excitement, maybe, about a specific moment. Post hormones, that changed. All of a sudden, I could convey emotions and experience emotions that weren't just anger and sadness. I was able to genuinely laugh at things, and it was interesting just watching like movies. Pre hormones, I would watch movies that other people would laugh at jokes or one liners, or like dad jokes when I would hear them from different friends or coworkers at work or whatever. I didn't find them funny. I couldn't laugh at them. I just almost saw them as an annoyance or a nuisance. And post hormones, pretty quickly, I started laughing, like genuinely laughing. I could watch TikToks or YouTube shorts or videos online that were meant to be hilarious, and I would break out laughing out loud, like literally just bust out laughing. It was an amazing thing, amazing experience. Sadness, all of a sudden, like, I could cry. And it wasn't that I was fighting back tears before, it was just like I didn't feel those emotions. The only real emotion that I ever felt that I could really show or convey was anger. I was sad for sure before, but I couldn't show it. I didn't know how to show it. And so, like, literally black and white TV to 8K, plenty of colors, was absolutely amazing. It was one of the best things ever. And that was a huge change pretty quickly. Physically, didn't notice a whole lot for close to a year. Breast development certainly started. There was some breast pain, but not a lot. And generally, the pain comes from just the weight of having something on your chest that you've never had before. But I always mentally just felt like, hey, it's happening. Things are moving. So those were kind of the big changes for me. After about 9 months, I decided that pills were just no longer going to work for the estrogen. I had resisted doing the injections just because I didn't want to give myself an injection, but I decided that it was probably the right thing to move into just because I didn't want my liver to totally hate me in 10 years. And so I decided that going to injections was an important thing. So I started doing injections. I talked to my endocrinologist again. He prescribed me injections. We at first went way too heavy on the medication, and I very quickly started having estrogen levels that were way too high, even for a cis woman. And so we monitored it. And one of the important things with hormones is working with a doctor who knows what they're doing and making sure that they are doing the things that are required. Oftentimes that means getting blood work done. I had blood work done anywhere from once every 3 months to 6 months to now I'm doing it about once a year. And I have a doctor who is reviewing the blood work, making sure that my prescriptions are still good, making sure that I'm not too high on any specific levels, making sure I'm not too low on any specific numbers. I no longer have to take testosterone blockers because I have had my gender confirmation surgery, which means I don't produce testosterone at the same levels anymore. And that is a story for several videos later that I will be more than happy to share in different videos. What I wanted to do today, though, and why I wanted to share that story with you is because I wanted to share what it has meant to me to be on hormones and why that is important for the trans community and why trans youth really need to know that people care about them and that people want them to be around. Before I started hormones, I struggled. I was trying to figure out who I was. I was trying to figure out what it meant to be in this world. And I did a lot of things. I didn't do anything illegal, but I was constantly trying to figure out where I fit in this world. And I think I'm fortunate that I had a really great group of friends that were always around me and at least allowed me to fit in with them, regardless of how awkward I may have been around them. I'm very fortunate that I had them. And coming out to them was great. They were some of the best people ever to have around me in that specific time. But knowing how I felt, and I was 30 years old when that happened, when I started going through that process, as someone trying to figure that out in high school, not knowing if you fit in, where you already are struggling to try to fit into the crowd, and from a psychological standpoint, knowing how hormones affected my life just from those simple things, I wish that I had understood, and when I was in high school, understood what the trans community really meant. When I was in high school, we didn't talk about trans or being transgender or anything like that. And now, today, it's definitely talked about more frequently, and I think that, yeah, that probably has changed the number of trans youth in America, but I don't think that it's necessarily changed the total number. I just think that it's changed the number we're aware of. Because I was a trans youth. I just didn't know it, and I didn't share it with people. And I think that it's important that we help those kids understand, one, that they can fit in and that they do belong and that they fit in with anybody and everybody, not just the trans community. And hormones are a huge part of that. Whether that be simple puberty blockers that have no long-lasting effects, or it moves into the next steps of the medical transition, which is adding the hormone replacement. Puberty blockers, though, are, again, no long-term permanent changes. All you're doing is putting a pause on puberty to allow someone to understand if they want to move forward with that process. Who knows, maybe that person gets to experiment a little bit and discovers, I'm not trans, I'm just understanding my body better. And that's perfectly okay. I'm not advocating for more trans kids. I'm just advocating for the trans kids that are out there already and saying, hey, you belong, you should be here. I honestly wouldn't want anybody to go through what the trans community has to go through on a daily basis. And as a kid having to go through that, that's 10 times worse. You're now getting fought over and you don't even have a say in it. And that's not right. We shouldn't be fighting over whether or not trans kids deserve to exist. They absolutely deserve to exist. And we shouldn't be making this fight about them. It shouldn't be a fight at all. We should be taking care of and looking out for these kids. I am often reminded of, not often, but I in thinking about this and trying to come up with a thought process for how we can fight for this and make this right. I recently in America, we have had a fight over bodily autonomy and what it means to get to make decisions over your own body. And abortion is one thing, but I'm not talking about abortion. I'm talking about vaccines. There are so many people in this country who have said, my body, my right to decide if I want to get vaccinated or not, that wanted to fight tooth and nail about vaccine mandates. Well, the same thought can be applied to trans healthcare. Who is it for us to decide whether or not a child, their parents, and their doctor get to decide whether or not that person gets to take hormones? It shouldn't be on anyone but those three. I don't want to be in that doctor's office. I have been in that doctor's office for myself. And I'm telling you right now, it's a very personal decision to go through that. And I've had that conversation with a therapist for many months before I actually started. I had the conversation with a therapist for 2 years before I had my gender confirmation surgery. I talked to 6 different doctors prior to having gender confirmation surgery. I talked to 3 different doctors prior to starting my hormones. There was a lot of conversation that went into it, and I don't think that there shouldn't be conversation that goes into it. I just don't think that anybody who isn't a part of that conversation or those conversations should be involved in making those decisions. And I don't think any person, politicians or a regular person out on the street who isn't the one taking those pills or isn't the one responsible for the person taking those pills should be having that conversation or making that decision for anyone else. For me, it was a very personal decision to move forward and take hormones. It was also a really important decision and a life-changing decision, and quite possibly saved my life to start taking hormones. And for trans youth who getting to use the correct pronouns are such a big part of transitioning, getting to be who they want to be and who they are inside is such an important part. Just using the right pronouns. For me personally, when I get misgendered by somebody and it's an honest mistake, it still cuts deep. And so if you basically tell a trans youth you don't get to be called that because we don't agree with it, you're basically telling that person you don't get to exist. You don't get to be you. You have to be who I say you are. And that's not right. And so, again, those decisions, healthcare decisions, using the right pronouns, that was part of socially transitioning. It was something that I talked to with my therapist. That was a discussion that we had, and how we do that, and how important it was, and how I felt when I had those pronouns used correctly. My therapist was the first person that I had start using the correct pronouns. And it was quite possibly one of the greatest feelings ever when I walked into her office and she used the right pronouns. The same thing with when I started having friends using the right pronouns. It was life-changing. It literally changed the way that I felt about myself. All of a sudden I had confidence. All of a sudden I felt like I could be me and it didn't matter. And that's something that I want every trans person to be able to experience. And no person should be able to control whether or not somebody else chooses their pronouns. I'm sorry if you don't believe that, but that's the truth. That's them. That's their decisions. It's their life. It's their body. And honestly, the confidence that comes from being who you are is one of the greatest things ever. And I'm sorry if that's just not what you feel, but it's how I feel, and it's why I want to do these videos. It's why I do these podcasts, why I interview other trans people. I want to get their stories out there. I want everybody to know you're not alone. Somebody else has experienced what you're going through. But also, think about, from an ally perspective, how great it is to know that you can connect with somebody who is trans, that you and them can have the same experiences. In one of my first episodes, I interviewed a trans woman who raced or used to race off-road just like I did. I came out in the while I was still off-roading or off-road racing, and I ended up leaving the racing world because of that. I'm in the process of trying to get back into it through photography and through videography, through a business that I've started. But having to give up racing because of that was definitely difficult. I miss being in the passenger seat of the race car. I miss racing. It was so much fun. And I just didn't think that going through the transition while racing was something that was going to be safe for me. And I wish that wasn't the case, because nobody should have to give up what they love doing just for being who they are. So from a hormones perspective, hormones now, being on hormones 4 years later and getting to be me out in the world and not being misgendered on a regular basis just from people that I interact with out in the world, working with the public and not having a majority of people misgender me is absolutely amazing. And getting to be me, getting to laugh, getting to enjoy life, hanging out with my cat, hanging out with my dog out in the world, and just enjoying being happy and pure joy is something that I wish every person on the planet would get to experience. And knowing how hormones allowed me to experience that after for 30 years not being able to experience all of those emotions, I don't want anybody to have to go through that. I don't think it's right that we fight over trans healthcare. There are it's the World. Oh no, I can't remember it. Sorry, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPATH, that has come up with standards of care for adults and a separate set of standards of care for youth and how to take care of them. This is a health organization that works with doctors all over the world, and I haven't worked with a doctor for my own personal health care that doesn't follow the standards of care from WPATH. And so if you want to regulate anything, regulate that. Make it so that every doctor that's going to prescribe hormones for trans youth have to follow WPATH. That makes sense. Give doctors guidelines on what to do. Don't tell them they can't do it. Don't tell trans youth that they can't take hormones, that they can't be themselves. Don't tell them that they aren't allowed to do the things that bring them joy. That's the absolute worst thing ever. All of these politicians that want to fight for abortion rights and say that abortion should be banned because they want to save the child. Well, what happens when that child is trans? Do you want to save that child still? No, you don't. You want to tell them they don't get to be who they are. You want to tell them that they have to be who you say they are. So you force them to be born, and then you force them to be who you want them to be and live in the world that you want them to live in and not be themselves. And that's not right. You don't get to have your cake and eat it too. And that's the problem. You're wanting to do everything. You're wanting to fully control it and be small government at the same time, and that's not right. You don't get to do that. You don't get to say all of the things that you say on one end and then have what you want to happen on the other end. I'm sorry, it's just not right. And honestly, I'm happy to see politicians like Senator Kavanaugh, who I spoke about in the last video, standing up and saying, I will not legislate hate. We need to, as a entire community, not just the trans community, LGBT community, allies, everyone needs to stand up and say, this is not okay, we are done with this. I'm doing my part, I'm educating, I'm trying to share what my experience was and why it was so important that I got to have hormones and why it was so important that I had people in my life that cared about me, that wanted to see me be happy and just be me. And I still talk to all of my friends that I came out to. I haven't lost any of them. They all are huge supporters of me. I'm so fortunate. But there are so many trans kids who don't have that or don't know they have it because we tell them that they don't get to be who they want to be. And that's not right. We need to fix this. And so I'm standing up. I hope you'll stand up. If you want to see more videos like this, leave a comment below. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to start releasing way more videos. If you want to be on the show, I'm more than happy to do an interview with someone. I would love to have allies and trans people alike on the show to share stories. I love connecting with people, but I also want to be able to put everyone's story in one place so we can all see that we can all connect. The name of the show is Trans Connections. Let's connect with each other. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye.